Brandon Carlisle here with Tough Enough Movement. We've got Roger Rigby today, the man, the myth, the legend. So I've known Roger for probably going on 25 years or so.
25 years.
Something like that. So Roger was wrestling coach of mine, high school photography teacher. He's been teaching for
24 years.
24?
Started in 2000.
2000? Yeah, that was my freshman year.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, well, let's get into just a little bit about Roger. Roger, where are you from?
Born in Las Vegas, moved here into Cache Valley, Utah when I was in first grade. So pretty much pretty much raised here. Grew up, went to college, not really knowing what I was going to do with that. Knew I liked art, so I became an art major. Somehow stumbled into photography and loved that, so I became a photography major. Not knowing what I was going to do. I was planning on being a commercial photographer. By the time I graduated, I had a family and got nervous about being able to support my family, so I looked to education as a more of a stable thing, income with a insurance plan and things. So I started taking the education classes and found out I really loved it. Took to it. It came easy to me. Loved being able to help young people discover art and being able to help them in other ways too. So I accidentally became who I am, really.
Yeah.
I look at that as kind of dumb luck, but maybe I was led to where I'm supposed to be, and I feel like I am where I'm supposed to be for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. So then did that come like middle of college, where that was kind of where you started leaning that way when you started having family and you were
towards the end. I took the long way through college. I didn't graduate till I was 30. Got married 93, graduated in 2000. So was married, had one child, and that's when I discovered photography when we were pregnant with the first child. And so never considered education until I'd finished all the requirements for my photography major. Then I just went back and did the education classes. So that was 98 or so, and went through them real fast and just found out I was a teacher. Never planned on being a teacher until I became a teacher.
Yeah. So you just went up to USU for all that?
Utah State. I always wanted to get out of the valley, like most people that grew up in Cache Valley, but my dad worked at Utah State, so I got a break on tuition there. So that was hard to pass up. And then as I was graduating and getting ready to find a job, I was looking out elsewhere, planning on leaving the valley. Had some job offers in LA and in Vegas, and then this Logan High job opened up. The photography teacher retired the same year I graduated. It fell right in my lap. Felt like it was meant to be. When I came home from the interview, I told my wife I got the job. I said, I'm not even 100%. I have this job, and they called me the next day and offered it to me. So.
Yeah. And so it all just did kind of seem to fall.
Sometimes I believe if you work hard enough and put yourself, do the work you're supposed to do, that once in a while things line up for you.
Yeah.
And I really felt like that was the case there.
Yeah. So and then you've been at Logan High that whole time.
This is my 24th year.
24th.
Yep, the only school I've ever taught at.
Nice. And then what coaching, was that just kind of something you kind of fell into too as well?
Yeah. Actually, I started teaching, like Brandon said, it was his freshman year. It was my first year teaching. Paul Leishman was in my class. He was one of my advanced students my first year, and we talked about wrestling, and I wrestled in high school, and he said, well, you should come to practice sometime. And so I did. I talked to the coach, and he said, yeah, we could use all the help we can get. So I just came really just to get a workout, and knew there was a couple of knuckleheads in my class that were on the wrestling team. So I thought I can maybe let them know that they need to shape up, or I'm going to come and work them over. Present company might have been one of those people.
Yeah.
And turned out they needed help, and I liked it too. So I accidentally became a wrestling coach.
There we go. So, and with because I mean, one of the reasons I brought you on here specifically was looking back at teachers and coaches and people that have helped me throughout the years. That you're definitely by far one of the most drawn, like that you draw students in. And for some reason, I feel like people feel connected and are more open with you. And I feel like they are comfortable around you. Is that something? Is it just you feel like that's something you are as a person, or is it something that like as a teacher, kind of like?
That's something I never planned on. And you're not the first one to say things like that. I think from my own history, I grew up as kind of a kid with low self-esteem, and I wouldn't say I came from a not an abusive household or anything like that, but maybe emotionally neglected. I felt like growing up, um, typically felt like I wasn't good enough for a lot of things. So I've been fighting low self-esteem my whole life. Turns out that allows me to be able to relate to people who are having similar feelings. And I guess I became a good listener, partially because I can relate to some things that people are going through. And also, a lot of times, I found I didn't really know what to say when people started unloading problems on me. So I would just let them talk. And turns out that's what they needed most of the time. If people just talk long enough, sometimes they solve their own problems. And so that's helped. Really, one of the things I'm most proud of in my career, though, is my classroom has become a safe place for people that don't seem to fit in anywhere else. Kind of a judgment-free zone, and not every kid needs that. In fact, most of them don't, but every year there's a few that need a little safe place and someone who isn't judging them or accepts them for who they are and things. And each year I find a few kids that feel at home in my room. So I feel proud of that.
Yeah, no, that's something that it's definitely when I went to your class, I noticed that, there were those certain people that were kind of drawn there. They were, I wouldn't say outcasts, but they were they didn't fit anywhere. And they just, and they just needed someone or something kind of.
Yeah. I've been called the school dad a few times by a few people, and kind of from all walks of life. I'm in the arts, but I'm also in athletics and a bunch of different things, so I can relate to a wide variety of different kids, not just the jocks or not just the art kids. But I guess I'm become pretty good at making people feel comfortable around me. So yeah, it's a pretty fun skill to have.
Yeah, no, for sure. And when you were talking about that, that's another reason I brought you on as well, is that part of this tough enough movement is kind of the trying to break the stereotype of tough, where I feel like the reason I got into lifting and got bigger and stronger was low self-esteem, right? Like I felt like I needed to be bigger and that it would help me in some way. Is that something you felt like
definitely
was a reason you went into getting
definitely.
bigger?
I started lifting when I was in probably 5th grade. My brother taught me how to bench press and a couple of lifts with some weights we had at home. And I always wanted to be bigger. And I was a small kid. When I graduated, I was only about 150 pounds. I tried to play football, but I was too small. I just got creamed all the time. Always wanted to be bigger. And still, even to this day, I still fight those feelings. Think of myself as that little skinny kid. Another teacher who I used to work out with a lot, Scott Wright, we had a conversation in the gym one time, and I was telling him this. Haven't told very many people that, but I was telling him, I still, in my mind, I know I'm pretty big, but in my mind, I'm still that skinny kid. And he's looked at me and goes, "You bench over 300 pounds." He said, "You can lift more than anybody in this room right now." And I thank him for telling me that, because I think of that oftentimes when I start having those feelings. A 54-year-old man shouldn't be worrying about this stuff anymore, but it still creeps in, and I'm fighting it too.
Yeah, it's definitely that body dysmorphia. Yep. Like it never goes away. Because I mean, you obviously saw me. I mean, I got bigger by senior year, but I mean, I was 120 going into freshman year, and before that, I didn't break 100 pounds till 8th grade. Right. I was always small, and still I still have that. Like my wife will tell me, I'll be like, why are these people looking at me weird? She's like, Brett, you're a big, intimidating guy, and in my head, I'm not. Like,
Yep.
even
Yep.
when I look at myself, I'm like, I'm always like critiquing it, and this dysmorphia of I have that in the head.
Yeah. Just the other day at the gym, I was doing pull-ups, and I'm pretty good at pull-ups. And a guy came over and said, "Dang, that's pretty good. We don't usually big guys aren't that good at pull-ups." And it shocked me that he called me a big guy. And now I'm like 210 pounds. I am a big guy, but in my mind, I'm not. I'm still that skinny kid. So.
Yeah. So, yeah. So then, getting into what I want to talk about is kind of getting that stereotype of the toughness to where people are tougher in the other sense mentally of not you're not always going to be mentally strong. It's a hard thing, and even to this day, like it's something that most people do struggle with, and it's like I want to open it up more to being tough enough to talk, and kind of like you were saying how I mean right now you're talking to me, but you get people to talk to you, which is another thing. Being tough enough to ask people how they're feeling, and like to reach out. Like, would you say that there's something you notice in your students? Like, is there, because I mean, you've had a lot of students go through hard times.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a similarity? Like, is there something specific that you see, or is it kind of just different?
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. I've had I don't know how many students that have lost the battle with mental health and depression. And there's times when we knew it was a problem, and there's times it caught us completely out of the blue. Um, I wish I knew more about that and could identify it quicker and save some heartbreak. Um, Asking for help is definitely not easy. And I like that idea that you're trying to get at, that break the stereotype that it's the weak people that have to ask for help. It's not. It's one of the hardest things I think it'd be hard for me. It is hard for me. I struggle with that a lot. I should ask for help more. I don't know why we think we need to handle our problems alone when um, there's so many people out there that are willing to reach out and help and make things better for us. Yeah, I wish I knew how to identify those better.
Yeah, because throughout the year, I mean, you said you've lost count of how many students, and like they were or had graduated. You've lost count of how many you've lost to that.
A lot. I have a poster on my classroom wall. It's a Pink Floyd album called "Wish You Were Here," and um, one of the first students I lost, I think it was the very first student I lost. Her name was Christine Lydell. She actually died in a car accident. But that was her favorite song, "Wish You Were Here." It's about a friend who has lost their way. But so I put her picture on that poster after she passed away, and I've had to add far too many. There's been a few that have passed away for other reasons, like her, but mostly the ones we've lost have been from suicide. Um, Average probably about one a year. We don't get one every year, but during the COVID stretch, for some reason, we lost a bunch. There was about 6 of them within a year. So it made up for the average there. It's a horrible thing, and I remember the first time when Christine died. A lot of her friends were also in my class, and I was struggling with it too. And all of a sudden, I had a bunch of teenagers looking at me to help them through this and make sense of that. And that was rough. It was really tough. But one of the most rewarding things I've ever had to do in my life. Be able to help someone through sorrow that they're going to have to deal with again in their life. We're all going to lose people. And it's not an easy thing, but it's part of this life. And so I think another reason why I've gone through some things previously in my life, I lost a good friend when I was in college to suicide, and learned a few things so that I'm better prepared to be able to help someone else who has to deal with that for the first time. So I've had to speak at enough funerals that I'm getting good at it, and I tell you, that's a shitty thing to be good at.
Yeah.
And I hope I never have to again. I tell people I hope the next funeral I go to is my own in a long, long time from now. and y'all have to speak at that one. So, um, but yeah, it sucks when you have to do it, but at the same time, I'm grateful to have been blessed with some knowledge of some things that are able to help people cope with that.
Yeah. And I don't like the other thing that with the suicide, I don't think people realize like when you're going through that, like in your mind, you're in a dark place. I mean, obviously I've been there. Like it's hard. Like it sucks you in and you don't think anybody's there. You don't. And not only that, like the people that are there, you don't think that they want to help. Like you just like you're like I'm just being a burden kind of feeling. That's the feeling you get, and but it's like they don't realize when they do that, like how it affects. Like when you're talking about the loss, just even as a teacher, like and being that close, like how hard it is for you, and then but like to think about their friends and their family and stuff. Like it's like they'd much rather have you reach out and ask for some help than to deal with that.
Oh, 100%. I've been fortunate enough not to have had the struggles with depression to get to that point in my own life. But through my experience with other people who have, I've learned quite a bit about it. Now, I'm not a licensed therapist and not an expert in this by any means, but just been through it a bunch. And that's what I've learned is that they feel so alone. They feel like when they get to that point, they're at a burden to other people, and no one. They feel like the world would be better off without them. That's what I've been told. As the one who's been on the other side of that enough times, I can tell you that is complete bullcrap. We would far rather meet with you, do whatever we can, talk, whatever we can do to help you through it, than try to deal with those burdens after you're gone. It's suicide. A lot of people think they say they took the easy way out. That's not true. They didn't. They lost. They're dead. You know, they've lost that battle. But I think the people who get to that point feel like they're doing everyone else a favor by taking themselves out of the equation when they're not. They're passing that burden and that sorrow on to everyone that loves them. I know sometimes it's hard to believe that anybody loves you, but they do. There's people out there that care about you and want you to be around. And if they had any idea the sorrow that you had in your own heart, they would do anything they could to help you. And that's what breaks my heart about the people I've lost is I wish I'd known. I wish I could have said something. My best friend in college called me the night before he died about 10 o'clock. And this guy was the funniest guy I'd ever met. He always has laughing. He called us about 10 o'clock the night before and just felt like he was shooting the breeze. And I thought it was weird because we both had to be at work at 6 o'clock the next morning. So he's like, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm going to bed. You know, so should you. And he talked to me for a second, didn't just shut the breeze a little bit. And then he asked to talk to my wife and actually made an appointment to get his hair cut with her. And we hung up, and then he went in the garage and killed himself. And talking to some therapists after that, he told us he was telling us goodbye. He reached out to us, didn't know how to ask for help, but wanted to talk to us one last time. I found a lot of comfort in that, knowing that in his darkest hour, he thought of me. I struggled knowing that in his darkest hour, I couldn't help him, but I had no idea. And I'd never had anybody in my life take their own life before. So it was all new to me. And of course, looking back, I maybe should have saw some signs, but didn't at the time. But he reached out to me, and it was his way of saying goodbye.
Yeah.
Had we had any idea of what was going through his mind, we'd have been there. We'd have, like I said, done everything we could to tell him how much we loved him.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's it is, and it's hard to hear. And obviously it's hard to talk about, but like it's kind of like where you can tell something's off a little bit, but not enough that you're like worried about it. And so,
Yeah. We all have our own lives and problems and things too, and sometimes you just worried about your own stuff, and that's hard enough. Um, what I've learned, and I still not great at this, but try to let people know how you feel about them. Um, I I had a teacher in high school. Like I said, I was the shy kid, sat in the back of the room, tried not to get called on. Um, wasn't a great student, all this stuff. Didn't really think any adults cared about me. Um, I had a teacher in high school named Mr. Churchill, and my first class with him, he acted like he cared about me. I remember him when I'd come to class, he'd greet me, he'd ask me about whatever's going on stuff, and I'm sure, I'm positive that he didn't treat me any differently than he treated everybody else. He was a well loved teacher because of that. But it was different to me because no one else did that to me. So I took every class I could from him. He was driver's ed teacher. He taught sociology. He was a weightlifting coach. That's probably another reason why I got into lifting. I kept lifting. He was a wrestling coach. Um, Everything I could take from him, I did because he noticed me and made me feel like I mattered, like someone cared about me. Um, well, then I graduated, went on to college. He retired. Years later, I started teaching at Logan High, and I had to go get my driver's license renewed. And I go into the DLD, and he was working in there. He just retired, and it's the first time I'd seen him in years. And um, he was new. He was running the camera to take your picture for the driver's license, and he wasn't very good at it. He couldn't, so I could tell he was struggling with the technology. So I let him figure his thing out, and then when he finally did, I said, Mr. Churchill, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your class a long time ago. And he looked up at me, and in high school I had really long hair and was a little skinny kid, and now I was quite a bit bigger and had shaved head and didn't really look the same. And so he looked down at my name on my paperwork, and he said, "Oh yeah, with the hair." And he remembered me, which as a teacher now, that was a miracle because we know so many people. But he remembered me. He asked me, "What are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm teaching and coaching wrestling." And I hadn't thought about it until then, but I was doing the same thing he had done, and kind of inadvertently followed his path. And so we couldn't talk for long because there was a line, but we talked for a minute, and then I left, and that was the last time I saw him. And a couple years later, he was killed in a motorcycle accident. And when he died, it made me realize that I had never thanked him for the impact he had on me. He brought me out of my shell. I really believe I would not have accomplished most of what I've done in my life without his influence. And I never thanked him for that. And
and I kind of wonder if maybe subliminally, maybe that's a reason you fell into that path as well. If like you're talking about it now, thinking about
possibly.
how much you looked up to him and how he did that route, and then you kind of end up following those.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was just something that in your head, it was something you looked up to.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm sure that has something to do with it.
No.
Well, since I never got to tell him, I robbed him of knowing the impact he had on my life in a positive way. I sometimes will tell this story to my students, and I challenge them. And I say, first of all, there's two challenges. Think of who in your life makes you feel important, and let them know. Now, it's an awkward thing to go up to somebody and say, "Hey, man, I love you. Thanks for what you do to me." It's awkward to say. I can tell you it's never awkward to hear. The person you say that to, it's going to be one of the best things that they've heard that day, I guarantee. But then the other half of that is I challenge my students, now go out and be that person for someone else. Because there's so many people walking around that school that don't have a friend, that got crap going on at home, that's all kinds of stuff. I hear stories that just break my heart of the problems kids have. They need a friend. Everyone could use a hand. I'll have my class say, I'll go, raise your hand if you have enough problems. Or if you want more. Raise your hand if you want more problems. No one raises their hand and says, I need more problems. Everybody's got enough problems, right? Well, that lets you know that everyone could use a hand. Some of us need more of a hand than others at different times, but we're all going to need some help sometime. Be that guy. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying hello to someone, because there's kids who haven't been greeted like people appreciate them. Tell someone, I'm glad you're here. You look nice today, stuff like that. There's people who have never heard that. I had a student named Ashley who left a note on my desk on her last day of school. Left a note on my desk her last day of school. And part of it said, you're the only adult who has ever cared about me. And it shocked me because I remember being there, and it's a lonely place to be. So that's kind of my challenge to people. Be that person. Say hello. Tell people you're glad they're there. Make people think that someone cares about them. The world needs a lot more of that.
No, it definitely does. And I think that a lot of people don't. I mean, they don't say that, like, because like you were saying, like as a kid, like that didn't never happen. Like a few years ago, my dad asked me, because his wife at the time was like, have you ever told your kids that you love them? And he was like, well, I mean, they know. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. And like a lot of people, like, and with friends, and I've tried to do it more, especially my wife now. She's like, why can't you say that? Why? And it's just like, I don't know. And I don't know if it's something I've been taught. And so like, this is kind of my way of trying to be better about it myself, and to try to open awareness and like try to get people to start talking and like to let people know those things too. Not
when you weren't brought up that way, it's not natural.
Yeah.
And it's hard. But like I said, it's never awkward to hear.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, I think that's, I guess I never thought about that. That like, it's never, but there's never been a time that you're like, when somebody says that, you're kind of like, it's not like you're like, well, no, don't. Yeah, like, yeah. No matter what it is or who it is, it's a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's weird at first when you're not used to hearing that. It's kind of hard you don't know what to say, but it's better. Yeah. So surround yourself with people that'll let you know what they feel like, and it rubs off.
Yeah. And so like when you're saying like in your shell kind of, and then you have students like that, and then you have students like me who, I wouldn't say I was in my shell. I was a little bit loud, obnoxious, and everything like that, but it was a different kind of, I mean, there's just let's see, it's Terrence Reals, he's a therapist and everything like that, and he says that I have it written here, 90% of male rage is helplessness masquerading as frustration. Yeah. And when I heard that, it kind of hit me, and I was kind of like, that was me. Like when I was angry and loud and being like that, like I felt helpless, and that was me. That was me being tough. That was, and that was me peacocking kind of, and like.
Yeah, I've learned as a teacher, well, the therapist that helped us through my loss of my friend earlier in life, his name was Dr. Glenn Latham, and I highly suggest reading some of his stuff, especially he wrote some things about teachers and students, and also about child raising. But some of the things that stuck with me was, he said, there's a reason why people act the way they do. And you get these, he was talking about kids, but I've noticed it with students as well, and this works. Everybody does something for a reason. And everybody wants to get, whether you call it attention or love, or they want something, some validation. And some people get it in different ways. Some people get it by being the good students and doing what they're supposed to do and turning in their homework, getting the grades. Some people don't think they can be that good student, and they might get it in other ways, by acting out, or causing a ruckus or disrupting class or something, and then they get attention by getting in trouble. He said you can, once you figure out the reason behind the action, you can separate the action from the emotion. And so you don't just hate the kid because he's a jerk. You realize, oh, this kid's acting this way because no one tells him they love him. He doesn't get any attention from being good. And you can start to turn those behaviors around. He said a lot of times those behaviors are not life-threatening and not really a huge deal if you can try to ignore the undesirable behavior and reward the desirable behavior. So when they do act like they're supposed to act appropriate, make sure you reward that, give them the attention, then they'll start to go that way. And I've seen it work. I had a kid in my class that was the biggest jerk in the world. Just he was a problem. He would steal stuff, he would break stuff, he'd ruin other people's projects, he would disrupt other people. He's just always a problem. And the biggest thing I could do to him, the worst thing I could do with him, was sit him somewhere where his friends couldn't see him, because then he couldn't get that attention from them, and it solved the problem just like that. And we had to do that a couple times. I had to put him over there. He almost cried when I put him around the corner so his friends couldn't see him. The next day he came out really sorry. Can I please sit with my friends? And it worked for a week or so, and then he started going into back to old behaviors. And I just had to threaten, hey, you want to go back over there? And he'd be good as gold. The next year he was in my class again, and he was 100% different. He learned that I wasn't going to put up with his stuff, but he also had started to learn that he could get his affirmation from doing the right things.
Yeah. And
it's kind of fun to see. And then after he graduated, he'd still see me. He worked at Costa Vida or somewhere, and he'd act like we were good buddies. And I'd think, man, I really wanted to punch you when you were acting out. But
you're like, I wish you would have come to wrestling practice a couple times.
Yeah. But everybody behaves for a reason. And once you can start to figure that out, and even for yourself, you start to turn things around.
Yeah, and that's because the acting out is different for different kids, like you say, and everything like that. And there was obviously, I am just barely getting to a point where I'm coping correctly, right? Like through years, so like in high school and stuff like that, it was being loud, being mean, like kids feared me, and then also like doing well in athletics for me were the ways of me to get attention and everything like that, to try to hide from my depression and my thoughts like that. That's what I did, was I made everybody scared of me, or people feared me, and they knew that I could do these things, like football and wrestling. Like I was, so like, and then even later in years, like that anger, I didn't deal with it, and I coped with it with alcohol and drugs, and that led me into all kinds of trouble throughout the years. And it's not just the trouble, but mentally, it just is way worse. Like, and then so I'm figuring to teach people how to cope correctly and how to get those affirmations in other ways, which are a lot easier than you think, and better, but.
Yeah. But it's hard to see when you're in the middle of all of it and have never, when that's all you know, you don't think there's any way to get around it. So.
Yeah, because I don't know, because that's one thing that I've been talking about, is it, because I mean, I had my suicide attempt 3 years ago that was bad, but because that one did almost kill me, and I was in the hospital for a week, and just walking and talking again at that, and it was hard, because even talking to like my mom, like, because she was the one that had to come get me, take me to the hospital, like just seeing her after that to me, like, and the way she had felt, like thinking about after, I was like, oh, there's something I could have done rather than that. But I mean, those weren't the thing that I want to explain too, is that wasn't when it started. It's not like I started having these feelings 34 years ago. Like, this has been an ongoing thing. And because like in high school, like most people didn't know I had 2 suicide attempts, and they, didn't take. Obviously, the one time I taken my dad's gun and fired, and firing pin hit, it didn't go. I don't know why. The other time, a couple of my buddies, they pulled me out of some water, and that was, I had just inhaled, and they pumped it out, and it was just, and it's like, I don't know if people saw that in me, or if they just thought I was an asshole. But I'm like, I just want people to be able to talk more, like, and reach out, like, if they could see that, hey, you look like you're, like, instead of everybody treating me like, yeah, Brent's just kind of an asshole. Like, maybe like you were saying, maybe he's going through something, but I don't want people to think that, instead of being, this guy's an asshole. Maybe like you were just saying, what are they going through? Like, can you ask?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
There's a reason for the way people act, and
Just 1 second.